So, coming off of a holiday week, we just celebrated Thanksgiving, which in all reality sets forth a whole month of holiday preparation for Christmas, the big holiday, the big one. Everybody in the world celebrates things like Christmas. Maybe not all over, but they at least know about it. But specific ones like Thanksgiving, American holidays, may be strange to some people, especially for those of you who might not have celebrated those things before, or maybe you find them enjoyable, but it's definitely different. Holidays, especially in our nation, but generally, are a big deal that gather a lot of attention and bring people generally together. So based on this definition, I want to talk about the holiday celebrated by Americans known as the Super Bowl. Well, not really a holiday. In America, it's celebrated just like one. You spend tons of money, you throw a party, you gather. Even if you don't like football, you're gonna deign to watch this. It's gonna happen. This championship game in February for everybody to see. But not every Super Bowl game is created equal. Some games are boring. Boring, and they could be for a lot of reasons. But whenever I know that it's boring, it's because it is not competitive. One team being up by 31 points by halftime usually doesn't get me excited. Something can happen like an upset, but it's not likely. While I think it's unexciting for a competitive or a non-competitive game, there is one specific group who might actually really love a game like that. The group whose team is the one who destroys the competition. Them, and probably only them, find that game to be something great, something enjoyable, and something that bolsters their pride for their team. Because it shows, especially in a championship game, that they are the best of the best and no one comes close. It sucks to be on the losing side of such a demoralizing game, but it's rejuvenating, it's empowering to be on the side of the team that destroys their opponents. Today, we are going to see not a boring competition between the supreme God of the universe and the Pharaoh of Egypt, but a great display of God's total supremacy over his enemies. We are going to see a great display how God displays his total supremacy over his enemies. And we'll see that in specifically two ways: his supremacy over spiritual powers and of human powers. Supremacy over the spiritual powers and of the human powers. And this will take place in Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 through 29. You guys can turn there with me. I once again forgot to name my title, or say my title, so here it goes. The title of the sermon is called The Depths of Darkness. And we will find out why when we look at this ninth plate in Exodus chapter 10, verses 21 through 29. It reads, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt.' So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was pitch darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light where they lived. Then Pharaoh called Moses and said, 'Go serve the Lord. Your little ones may also go with you. Only let your flocks and your herds remain behind.' But Moses said, 'You must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock also must go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind, for we must take of them to serve the Lord our God. And we do not know with what we must serve the Lord until we arrive there.' But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. Then Pharaoh said to him, "Get away from me. Take care never to see my face again. For on the day you see my face, you shall die." Moses said, "As you say, I will not see your face again." This is the story of the 9th plague in Egypt, which means there are 8 before it. The purpose of these plagues can be generally seen in chapter 7. And this is the purpose, that the peoples will know that the one who does the plagues is truly God. And it is oh so true for our passage today as well. And this passage comes in such an incredible time in the history of Israel. The people of Israel were slaves in Egypt and have cried out to God to save them. And God keeps his promises to their forefathers and begins this process of salvation. God, similarly to a hero in a movie, comes in when all hope is lost. But when the hero usually struggles to take the final victory over the enemy, God instead here totally overpowers the Egyptians again and again and again, with each plague growing in more intensity, more power, and more glory. It's not a question who is the greatest between these two sides. God is supreme. He does all this, all of it, so that the people will know who is supreme, who is over all other powers, all other rulers and authorities. And the first thing that we're going to see is that God's supremacy is over these spiritual authorities in verses 21 through 23. God is telling Moses here to stretch out his hand towards heaven so that a darkness fills the land, and darkness comes. But the text makes clear that this isn't just some normal darkness. This is a darkness that can be felt, is how the passage says it. And unfortunately, we lose this idea, especially those of us who have lived near Chicago for so long. It's one of the biggest cities in the United States, and therefore one of the biggest cities with light pollution. Darkness for these people was just that, extremely dark. See, when I was in Kentucky, I was able to visit the famous Mammoth Cave a couple times. And after traveling through quite a bit of the cave system, we entered into this big room with benches. And the tour guide let us sit down wherever we wanted. And as we were sitting down, he's like, "Now we're going to show you what true darkness is." Hits the switch, and the lights go out. While you're just sitting there, somebody could be right next to you. You don't even know it. He says, "Lift up your hand. Put it right in front of your face." You can feel the breath, but you can't see the hand. Visibility was at 0% for the Egyptians. The darkness was real. And yet the Bible still distinguishes the normal darkness that Egyptians have with this darkness that God sends over Egypt. It was a debilitating, stifling, crippling, suffocating darkness. It was so bad that the people didn't even leave their homes. It was too dangerous. They couldn't see, despite what light they may have been able to create, which means that anything could happen in the dark. This is not an ordinary darkness. It's unique. And God uses it to show that He is the one over all of creation. He is the one who created light in the very first verses of the Bible. And He is the one who can take it away just like He does here. And He does this to prove the one and simple truth that He is supreme and there is no other before Him. The Egyptians were a foreign nation with foreign gods. They did not believe in the God of the Bible, but a plurality. The greatest of these gods was the god named Ra or Amun-Re. And it could be argued that each of these plagues was showing God's power over a different Egyptian god. And specifically with darkness, God shows that he is the supreme ruler over everything, even this god of Ra, because Ra was the god of the sun, the god of light, yet God here shows darkness. When the sun should be up, when Ra should bring it up, it is not up. So the Egyptians believed every day Ra was the one who brought them light. But God shows that it was never Ra who gave them light. It was never Ra who sustained them. It was never Ra who made the sun go up and the sun come down. But it was always the God of the Hebrews, the supreme God over everything. And the Egyptians, they learned this well. Their gods were not their authority, and their gods were not in power. It was, always has been, this God, the supreme one. They believed in these false gods and their false powers that they put their hopes in, but none of it was real. And you might think that the Egyptians were idiots for believing in these mythological creatures. But I am sure that the Egyptians would think we today are idiots for not believing in any other greater power. For believing that we are the ones who are actually in control, which is so common in our Western ideas. But even one glimpse at our society today can prove that we're not in control. Humans are not in power. They're weak. Not because of some great big God, but because of one tiny little virus. It's foolishness to believe in anything but the supreme God over everything, whether that be some other spiritual power or the denial of any spiritual power. Do not trust in yourself. Do not trust in anything else, but put that trust in the God who is supreme, the one and true God. And this one God, this supreme God, is not done making a fool of the Egyptians. He is not content to show them that he is supreme over these natural and spiritual powers alone, but he's supreme over the earthly powers, the human powers, specifically Pharaoh. God is supreme over all powers, earthly powers and rulers as well. See, Pharaoh is the king of the known world, the powerhouse, the one who can snap and everything he desires will be handed to him on a silver platter. This is the king who the whole world trembles before, but God doesn't. In fact, God shows the Israelites that Pharaoh is a fool who cannot see what will come to pass, let alone his own hand in front of his face. Pharaoh, after 3 days, is done with darkness. And after 9 total plagues, he finally relents. Well, kind of. He allows Moses and the people to go out into the wilderness to worship. But something isn't right. He won't let them bring their livestock with them. Pharaoh isn't stupid. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't want to give them everything that they desired. He's probably keeping some collateral so that they'll come back and not run away. He doesn't want to lose this powerful force of labor. He's trying to play Moses the fool, which in all reality is playing God the fool. He's trying to get Moses to sign a deal without going over the small print, the stipulations. But Moses sees through this right away. The whole point of the Israelites going into the wilderness was to make sacrifices to God and worship. But without their livestock, that'd be meaningless. It becomes impossible. See, Pharaoh is trying to keep some of his power. He's trying to play God. But in reality, according to this passage, God is the one in control of Pharaoh. That is why we see God as the one who hardens Pharaoh's heart. God was supreme over Pharaoh. God has the heart of Pharaoh in his hands, and he directs it wherever he wants it to go, as we see in Proverbs. God is supreme and continues to show it through the falling apart of Pharaoh. This is a stubborn king, one who refuses to let these people go. And his stubbornness, his rage in his stubbornness and rage, he kicks Moses out and he threatens him. He says, if you ever see my face, you're going to die. Moses in kind, probably in his greatest moment of revealing his ineloquency in speech, says, "Fine, whatever you say." Pharaoh, the greatest king in the known world, results to yelling and threats, like the child who is angry at his friends in a playground. Pharaoh, although powerful, is but a man. He has no authority over this supreme God. He is but a pawn in his hand because he rules it all. Whether human or spiritual, God has no rival. No one and nothing compares to his supremacy. The kings of the world today are just as in God's control. They are just as much in his hands as Pharaoh was then. Whether they persecute Christians, whether they're making stupid tweets, he is in control of it all. It's not just kings, it's all of us. Pharaoh was the leader of the Egyptians. But he's not only in control of the enemies, but those who lead churches as well. And he will make a fool of anyone who goes against him. So there is no power on earth or power in heaven that can stand against him. He is supreme. And God proves his supremacy, not just here in Exodus with the plagues, but throughout the storyline of the Bible. Over and over again, we see people, rulers, and kings humiliated before this supreme God. In 1 Kings, on the Mount of Carmel, the prophet Elijah goes against the prophets of Baal. They try to summon their God and send fire down. They go as far as cutting themselves, shedding their own blood so they can summon this fire. But nothing comes. And Elijah is making fun of them the whole time. And instead, God comes in a miraculous display, swallowing up the entire altar that was soaked in water and fire, showing that he alone is supreme and his enemies are nothing. We see in Isaiah that there is no other God but him. Anyone who worships idols are fools, because what they worship is not something spiritual, but something made by the hands of men. But Isaiah mocks them for their foolishness, to not believe, because they're not believing in something that's supreme, a God who is there. But these idols were nothing. We see in Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar, after exalting himself so highly, is stripped bare and made to live like the livestock in the field for years. He is humiliated, and God is supreme, even in foreign lands like Babylon. And finally, and most importantly, we see this proven true through Jesus and his resurrection from the dead. Colossians 2 says that Jesus is supreme because of his death and resurrection. This made the greatest of our enemies, the greatest of his enemies, sin and death, fools before him, subjected under his feet, humiliated because of his power, his supremacy. They are under his feet in open shame, and he is confidently triumphing over them. And the passage then tells us that anyone who believes in him will also be made alive with him and enjoy the victory that Christ has accomplished, that he gives. This is the supreme God, the victor over his enemies, dominating them completely, humiliating them. This is a team I want to be on. This is a team that wins. Now, being on a team, with the NFL example, when you're a fan, you actually don't do anything to accomplish the victory. But when they win, you get excited. You go out, you buy those shirts, you buy those hats, you buy those whatever memorabilia that you can find to gloat. Champions 2020, champions whatever year. You get to brag, you get to boast that not that you won, but your team won. And in a similar way, we do not boast because we do anything. We boast in a God who is supreme. We shout that victory. We proclaim it to those around us because it is his victory that we can rest in, his victory that we can have joy in. And it is in that victory that we have salvation. I may not be a part of the team that won, but I am part of the family of God because he brings me into that victory as well as he can anyone else who believes in him. So this is our supreme God. There's nothing that can stand against him, whether human or spiritual. There's nothing that even comes close. Somebody might say it's a boring battle. But anybody who truly knows God knows that it's the most exciting thing that we can be a part of. The greatest thing that we can be a part of. So, will you join him and bask in his victory, Jesus? Or will you be defeated like all of his enemies? Let's pray.